All right, Warhammer 40K enthusiasts, in terms of Games Workshop hobby supplies, this is the question of the day, and perhaps it's not so much a question, but more as a natural evolution, because this is something that I've noticed not only in myself, but also other hobbyists as they've made their journey through this narrative called Games Workshop. So certainly Games Workshop sells miniatures to use with their rules. They've got some other media and apps and digital content, but an important part of their revenue, hobby supplies, paints, tools, paintbrushes, gaming cases. From that perspective, are those hobby supplies worth it? Or one could say, much like the miniatures, are they extremely overpriced for what you're getting? And is there a point where it's no longer worth it to use GW supplies, or should you ever use GW supplies? Now, when I jumped into 40K, it was through a local store, and I was new to painting miniatures. I've always been honest with you guys, and I'm going to be honest in this moment. Early on, when I started painting miniatures, it was for a Dungeons & Dragons game. We were playing all summer, and the final battle at the end of the summer, whether the players were ready or not, they were going to go up against Tiamat. So along the summer, we were cutting out pieces of cardboard and painting them and assembling this dungeon layer with a portal, and we were collecting miniatures for the final battle. And there was going to be minions and lich and undead stuff too. It just wasn't going to be Tiamat. It was probably like Tiamat and friends. I didn't know about painting miniatures. All I knew at the time, building models, and model rocketry was and still is an important part of my life, I was utilizing Tester's paints on my miniatures. I don't even know if I primed them at the time, but from that perspective, once I jumped into Warhammer 40,000, it was natural and it was an extension. Oh, here are the models that I'm buying at the store, the miniatures. Here's all the painting supplies, the GW paint supplies. So I just naturally purchased and used GW supplies for a long time. It was there. It was convenient. Now, besides the convenience, I will say early on what helped me tremendously was being able to look in White Dwarf, being able to look in other hobby guides, and GW would actually show you not only the steps, but lay out, these are the colors. These are this is your palette that you're going to be working with. And it was very, very easy to match that. And of course, another advantage was over time, as I added pieces to my collection, I knew Dark Angels Green was Dark Angels Green. So when I needed to buy new paint, when I needed to add pieces and I was running low, it was easy. I never had to think about matching the paints or what would be the difference between the two. And that served me for a long time. But as I jumped into other miniature systems, as I started painting board games and moving into historicals, I jumped into other paint systems and I jumped into other paint products, ranging from Vallejo to Army Painter. And now I'm kind of at the place where, and I'm looking over at my paint shelf, I don't have any GW paints left. That's not to say I stopped using them or got rid of them, but as I used them up and as I spilled my washes all the time and had to replace them, I gradually phased over to these other products. I'm now at the point where I believe, based on the community, based on the fact that you can easily map out online, this is the GW color, here's the other colors from the other paint ranges, I don't really see a reason to buy Games Workshop paints, because while the quality is excellent, and over the past 5-6 years, they've been very, very innovative in the different types of paints that they have. I mean, I'm not going to question, I'm not going to doubt that, but in terms of price and what you get, there are better alternatives, in my opinion. That said, there are some advantages to going with GW paints. And I think ultimately what really dictates it and what dictated it for me was volume. I was painting, and I still paint a lot of stuff, putting that hobby money into quality paints where I get more, then I can use that for more miniatures or more board games. Sidebar note, because we're jumping into hobby here a little bit. I only use the hobby paints on my miniatures, bases, and very, very select terrain pieces that are like in the Fritz cave that really are miniatures in themselves, some of the GW terrain kits. For the rest of my terrain, for Battletech, for Pacific Rim, the mass scale wargaming terrain, I just use very, very cheap acrylic paints, like the hobby paints, to paint my terrain, because I go through so much of it. When I was making my Judge Dredd Mega City 1 terrain, stacking on top of each other, a lot of walkways, a lot of City Tech, City Fight on there, to use hobby paints on that would consume so much, it wouldn't be practical, it wouldn't be efficient. So I would say, as you move into painting your terrain, look for alternative paints. Agree or disagree. Don't go through your hobby paints from that perspective.